Welcome to this explainer on the sacrifice and resurrection of Toyota. Let's just transport ourselves directly into the boardroom of a nearly bankrupt Japanese truck maker. The date, June 5th, 1950. The air in the room is just thick with tension, and the founder's son is about to do something that, honestly, almost no modern executive would ever even consider. Kiichiro Toyoda, the literal man who willed this entire company into existence, is resigning, fully. And to understand why, we really need to look at the sheer scale of the disaster they're facing. The company is completely suffocating in this brutal post-war economy. They're barely managing to produce a paltry 300 trucks a month. The math simply doesn't work, cash is operating fast, and they literally cannot make payroll. So, to survive, management concludes they have to ask roughly 1,600 workers to leave. That's about 1 in 6 employees. But there is a massive problem here, and it extends far beyond the human cost of the layoffs. See, the company had previously made this firm, solemn promise to its own union that there would be 0 layoffs. When this survival plan drops, it just shatters that trust. The workforce absolutely erupts. A furious, paralyzing strike kicks off in April of 1950, shutting the factories down day after day, week after week, and bringing everything to a total grinding halt. Part 1. The Unthinkable Resignation. A True Sacrifice. Right in the middle of this absolute chaos, Kiichiro chooses to put himself at the very top of the list of sacrifices. This wasn't some resignation of convenience. It was a deeply Japanese form of accountability. The leader absorbing the shame of the institution so the institution can go on. He accepted that this crisis happened on his watch, He walked away from the company that literally carried his family's name, paying the ultimate professional price for peace. Part 2. From Cloth to Cars. Audacious Origins. To truly grasp the sheer gravity of what Kiichiro just walked away from, we have to look back at their audacious origins. Oddly enough, this massive global automotive empire, it began with cloth. Kiichiro's father, Sakichi Toyoda, was this brilliant self-taught engineer obsessed with textiles. In 1924, he perfected a revolutionary automatic loom. 5 years later, in 1929, the patent rights to that incredible piece of machinery were sold to a British company. And it was that specific influx of cash that funded something wildly audacious: Kiichiro's absolute determination to take his family's business into automobile manufacturing. Everyone at the time said Japan was hopelessly behind America's giants, but Kiichiro pushed forward anyway. Finally, in 1937, his automotive division was spun out as a completely independent company. They were so intensely focused on setting this new venture up for success that they even tweaked the brand itself. The family name was Toyota with a D, but they actually softened the company name to Toyota simply because it was visually cleaner to write in Japanese. So here we have this independent, forward-looking company built on loom money, chasing the American giants and fueled entirely by a founder's singular vision. Part 3. The Death Spiral. Post-war wreckage. But that optimistic dream was utterly shattered by the wreckage of the Second World War. When Toyota tried to resume building trucks in this crazy landscape of scarcity and hyperinflation, they hit a massive financial wall in 1950. Remember those impending layoffs we talked about? Well, when they were announced to try and save the company, the ensuing strikes dragged production down by a devastating 70% from its already dire levels. Think about that for a second. They were barely surviving making 300 trucks a month, and then the strikes wiped out almost 3/4 of even that meager output. They were trapped in an impossible paradox. It was a literal death spiral. The company was way too broke to keep its people employed, yet entirely too paralyzed by the violent labor conflicts to actually build the trucks that might earn the money to keep them. Every single day that strike dragged on, the company bled closer and closer to total liquidation. There was just no mathematical way out.
Part 4. Sacrifice and Revival. Breaking the Spiral. Now, this is exactly why Kiichiro Toyoda's deeply Japanese act of accountability, his total resignation, was the shockwave that broke this deadlock. His departure was the ultimate concession. It ended the strike immediately. The union stood down, the painful restructuring was finally allowed to happen, and the remaining workers went back to the lines to try and save a company that had nearly died.
And then, history handed Toyota a lifeline with almost cruel timing. Later that exact same month, June 1950, war broke out on the Korean peninsula. Suddenly, the American military needed enormous quantities of trucks and vehicles close to the front lines, and they began placing massive orders with Japanese manufacturers, which included Toyota. This massive procurement boom flooded the company with exactly the demand and the cash it had been starving for. The order books just filled up instantly. It is an uncomfortable truth that the company was essentially saved by a war, but hey, it's part of the honest record. But what Toyota did with that sudden reprieve is where the story truly earns its global legend. Instead of just breathing a sigh of relief and returning to business as usual, Toyota took that near-death experience of 1950 and burned it deep into its soul. They swore they would never, ever again allow themselves to carry waste. No excess inventory, no excess capacity. They took the absolute trauma of almost losing everything and systematized their survival into what the entire business world now studies as the Toyota production system. This wasn't some flashy management fad, guys. It was a hardcore philosophy of just-in-time manufacturing forged right in the fires of near bankruptcy. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the connection between their past and their future. Remember Sakichi's automatic loom from 1924? Its absolute masterpiece feature was that it could stop itself the exact instant a single thread broke, saving material and preventing defects. It embodied this core principle of building problem-detecting intelligence directly into the machine. Well, under the new Toyota production system, that loom principle was reborn as a permanent, factory-wide principle of waste hatred. Every single worker was empowered to stop the line if they spotted a defect. The intelligence of the loom basically became the intelligence of the entire corporation. Part 5. Lessons in every Toyota. Beyond manufacturing. Tragically, the man who made all of this possible, Kiichiro Toyoda, did not live to see any of it. He died in 1952 at just 57 years old, right as plans were actually forming to bring him back to the company. He never saw the Corolla. He never saw the Camry. He never saw his company conquering the massive global market he had once studied from afar.
Think about it. The company that once struggled to make 300 trucks in its worst month now produces more vehicles than that every few minutes. That entire empire is built on some truly profound leadership lessons. It proves that genuine accountability taken at real personal cost commands ultimate respect. It shows us how a company's darkest year can literally become the founding trauma of its greatness. And crucially, it reminds us that bitter discipline learned in a crisis must be transformed into permanent strength. Founders often build futures they may never get to visit. Kiichiro never saw the empire, but he built it anyway.
So as we close out this explainer, the legacy of Kiichiro's sacrifice leaves us with a pretty profound challenge. The lesson built into every Toyota was never really about cars. It's about taking complete responsibility, wasting nothing, and building for tomorrow. So I leave you with this question. What are you willing to take complete responsibility for and build today, even if you never get to see it finished? If this story sparked something for you, stick around and subscribe. We're here to explore the real stories of people who just started, long before the world gave them permission. We'll catch you in the next one.